Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to the show. We don't care where you're listening, how you're listening, or why you're listening. We're just glad that you are. John Buzby along with Marty Sheehan. And week 5, 6 weeks of football, if you count week 0, is in the books. And it was a iffy week in terms of close competitive games, probably more on the side of not so much than so much. And we'll get into that in just a second. But we want to first start by talking about the Middletown policy for getting into games. And I say Middletown because that was the home game where it was enacted on Friday night for the first time, Thursday night, actually, excuse me, for the first time. The new Appoquinimink School District policy we talked about last week, where basically every participant, player, cheerleader, band member gets 5 tickets, and those have to be allotted by name to 5 people. Only students from the respective schools are allowed into the game. And so, Marty, you talked to a couple of people who were at the Middletown game, and things seemed to go pretty darn good.
I did. Yeah, they were really happy with it. And the first thing I thought was, they followed through, which is exactly what you wanted to happen. What I heard was that there were no problems at the gate. People that were on the list got in. One of the people I talked to said they didn't see anyone who was rejected. So people got the message that if you weren't on the list, don't show up. I did hear that there was an increased police presence, maybe 15 to 20 officers kind of roaming around the stadium. And they were the only ones roaming around the stadium, because I also heard they were very strict on the roaming policy. They did not let groups of people get up and walk around, which is perfect. That's what they said they were going to do, and they didn't do it. They had 2 separate entrances so that it was more speedy, a little more efficient. And by all counts, everything went great. I've seen no complaints. And as you said, it was the only game this week where it was debuted, or it was the game where it was debuted this week. So everything went very smoothly. And Middletown's the big school involved in all of this. So if it works there, you have to imagine it's going to work at Appo and Odessa as well. So this was a great step in the right direction. Yeah. I think this, they said what they were going to do. They spelled it out very clearly, and they did it. They followed through, and they made it easier for people to get in, so there weren't these long lines at the beginning. So kudos to Middletown for pulling this off.
Did the people you talked to say anything about how big the crowd is? And let me preface
They said the crowd was definitely smaller.
Okay. And that's what I was going to preface this by, is the game was against William Penn. Now, it was homecoming.
Yep.
William Penn traditionally does not travel well. Parents go, and that's pretty much about it from my experience. So it'll be interesting. The next game is Sally's. Sally's travels well and will be expected to be a better game. A lot of people didn't think the Middletown William Penn game would be a close game, and in the end it wasn't. But the Sally's game is a different story. That's a game everybody marks on their calendar. Rival school, Bill Donardo, of course, Sally's coach now, coached at Middletown, won a couple state championships there. And so there's a big history between those two schools. So it was probably kind of good. And congratulations to Colleen Kelly, the athletic director at Middletown, and everybody involved for pulling it off. I mean, this is the most strict since COVID, and COVID was very simple. It was 2 people, and that's it. There was no list. There was no anything like that. It was, you're here, 1, 2, boom, your player's taken care of. This is a lot more complicated, so to speak. And so congratulations to Middletown for pulling it off. But the next week, this coming week, when they play Sally's, they're going to have probably, I would say, close to 500 or 600 more fans trying to get into the stadium. Hopefully on lists and stuff like that. But hopefully it goes just as smooth. Appoquinimic's next home game's not until the following week, so we'll see how that goes. Odessa's not going to have the crowd issue that these 2 schools do, because the team's doing great, but the student population is half of what it is at these other 2 schools. And so,
now the only other thing for Sally's in Middletown that one of the individuals brought up was, it is the Beat the Beast game, their anti-cancer game, and they usually draw a huge crowd for that night. And they sold shirts, and so it's going to be interesting to see how that affects the crowd, and what they do about possibly letting other people in, or because it is a special game, and there are different factors there. But a huge game this week against Sally's.
All right, so that's one non-football on the field related item. The second is at the DIAA board. This meeting, Marty did some research and found not a hard lot. It wasn't intense research. The agenda is a public document.
That's right.
Not a whole lot of people look at it, but of course Marty does. And it says right on there, one of the first things they're going to do is they use the term hearing, HEARING, for the DMA ineligible player issue. And what that will probably mean is that the higher ups from DMA, certainly Jeremy Jean, I would assume the head football coach, And I'm not sure whether the commandant has been asked to join that meeting. I'm sure he's been invited.
Right.
They've invited whoever wants to come, I'm sure. And so it will be interesting to see how that falls out. Marty, I was thinking they don't have these types of things for everybody who reports an ineligible player.
Right.
And that's not to say that this is anything different. We don't
Right.
know. And we're not going to get into that today. They did have a hearing, and I'm using air quotes for those who aren't on YouTube, for the Middletown situation. And so this, I think what it tells the public is that they need to learn more about the situation. And
yes,
why they need to learn more, nobody knows officially. And so that will probably come out at this meeting on Thursday. It starts at 9:00, available. It's open to the public. You can get it online. Just go to the DIAA website or the Board of Education website, and you can watch it on Zoom like everybody else. And so it'll be an interesting meeting. You know what's going to be the most interesting, Marty, is if this meeting ends before sundown.
I was going to say either that or they're able to keep a quorum before lunchtime.
Right.
These meetings, it's funny that this one is actually pretty truncated in terms of the agenda as opposed to other meetings, which I think they learned with last week. They separated out. They had a meeting last Thursday on the strategy planning and that big anonymous survey that they did with the 400 respondents or whatever. They actually broke that out and had that last Thursday. I did not tune in. I don't know anybody who did, but thankfully that's out of there because the last time they did this, the first thing the guy did when he came on was he said, "Well, I'm probably going to need an hour or two," and you could hear the moans audibly from the people in the room. So, it's going to be interesting. As you said, they don't normally hold hearings like this. The Middletown one, everyone was summoned to the meeting or was at least given a chance to participate, and Middletown had brought everybody to the table. They had the principal, the coach, the AD. So, it'll be interesting to see what this is about. And the one thing I also think it shows is that DIAA is watching things a little more closely now after the Middletown situation. Yeah. So, it'll be interesting to see, but it does send a message, I think, too, that just be careful when you're monitoring these things and, make sure you don't want to get in this situation. Right. So, it'll be interesting to see. And the funny thing is that, DMA is absolutely on a roll right now on the football field. So hopefully for them, this is just a little bump in the road.
Yeah, so we'll see. Marty, you'll be following along. I know I have a work commitment. I cannot be. So Marty will be tweeting out any major updates. He's not going to spend every second tweeting out what's being said, but you can tune in and again, follow us on Twitter at DELHS Football. That's DELHS Football. That's where he'll be tweeting out from both our account and his personal account as well. All right, before we go on the field, this day and age, we all think our iPhones are great cameras. That is until you see a team photo, individual portrait, or an action shot taken using a professional camera, a huge lens, and most importantly, have a pro behind the lens. And that's Andre Smith of Andre L Photography. That's EL Photography. He takes unbelievable sports photos. It doesn't matter to the sport or the age of the athlete. He was actually on the sideline of the Caravel soccer game. He takes photos for Caravel Academy. It's where his son went, played football, graduated now, and plays down in Florida. And also his daughter goes there. So he's sort of their photographer of choice, and I understand why. But the next morning, actually even that night, Andre sends me an email with a couple photos of my son Riley, who's the goalie for the Appoquinimink soccer team. And so and my wife looked at him and she was just steamrolled by how good they are, and she sent them out to a couple people and they were asking about him. And it's again the same thing. People see a lot of good photos, cell phones, that type of stuff that you can take pictures with, but nothing like a pro camera from the sideline. And so whether you're looking for somebody to do like a portrait situation with your child, especially if they're a senior, or you want Andre to come to a game and take action shots like he did at the Caravel Appo soccer game, he's the man for you. It's Andre Smith, and he's a former professional photographer, worked for the News Journal. I mean, he's still a professional, former News Journal photographer, and still does it professionally. Obviously, you can see all his great work on his website, which is AndreLphotography.com, and that's EL, AndreLphotography.com. Whether you're in charge of your league team pictures and want a photographer, or you want somebody to come take shots of your team or your player individually, he's your man. Andre Smith at AndreLphotography.com. All right, let's go to the field, Marty. I think one of the most anticipated games of the week, which now extends 3 days, when Thursday, Friday, Saturday this past week, was the Archmere St. Mark's game. Archmere on a 2-loss skid very unusual for them after having not lost for a long time before that.
Right.
Go into St. Mark's. St. Mark's takes the lead 14-7 at the half, but then they're outscored 21-0 in the second half. One of our favorite players, Chris Albero, had just an incredible game. I'll let you talk about his stats, but this is a game that a lot of people were looking forward to. We watched it on TV, and it just it turned out to be what you would expect it to be. I'm not sure people thought Archmere would win, especially since it was in the graveyard. But I think Archmere all went into this game with we got to get back on a winning streak here, and we can't lose our third game here halfway through the season. So, your thoughts?
To the people who tuned in, 302 was not able to show this game live. There were internet issues. You and I have done games from there. There are always internet issues at the graveyard. For some reason, it is a Wi-Fi dead zone. Yes, no pun intended with the graveyard. But if you do want to see it, they did upload the game to YouTube, so it is there for everyone to see. I know you and I went back and watched some of it. This was an interesting game because you had, as you said, Archmere was really kind of dangling there with 2 straight losses. They didn't want a third. St. Mark's rolling along. And boy, they are just, it seems like Archmere's their kryptonite. They have not beaten Archmere in 5 years, including a blowout loss that no one saw coming in the playoffs last year. And this looked like St. Mark's had a chance. 14-7 lead at halftime. Very uncharacteristic performance from St. Mark's. A lot of penalties. They had turnovers, 2 of which went to Chris Albero, one of which he returned for a touchdown, the other which was an interception that sealed the game for them. This kid, as far as leaders go, this kid is amazing. 11 of 19, 198 yards and 2 scores. He also had a rushing touchdown and the 2 interceptions. Of course, like I said, the one he returned for a TD. This is going to get them back on schedule. Now, the one thing I will say about this is I don't think this does anything to diminish St. Mark's title hopes. No. They did not play well. They admitted as much after the game. And I think this is a learning experience for them. You and I have always said for undefeated teams, that first loss is not necessarily the end of the world as long as it happens in the regular season. Right. You don't want that loss to come in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So I think this is going to refocus St. Mark's and get them going. It's the same way it is for Archmere. Archmere goes to Tower Hill next week, which is down this year. So they have a chance to get on a serious roll again. St. Mark's, I believe, has Concord this week. That's going to be that should be a win game for them. Concord is not their characteristic good self from a few years back. So, I think both of these teams can take something coming out of this game. St. Mark's kept it close. They have to be disappointed with that second half, but they know they can play with Archmere. I believe they think they can beat Archmere because of all the mistakes they made that they did not make in the first 5 games of the season, the first 4 games of the season. So, again, 2A is just so wide open, which we'll talk about later, but these are definitely 2 of the title contenders.
Yeah, I've got 2 quick thoughts. You already sort of covered one of them. I think this is a great loss for St. Mark's. I think it's a great loss for St. Mark's because other than the Appo game, they had been rolling along. And Appo game that they won, but it was a close game. They've been pretty much rolling along in their wins. I think Joey Wright's he's got a perfect reason of why we're still practicing next week, because we've got some things to work on. The other thing I'm worried about a little bit, and why I think maybe this is a good loss, is because the Concord game could be a trap game because they have DMA the week after.
That's right.
And so, again, nobody wants to lose. But I think if you asked Joey Wright and he was honest, he said, you know what? This loss is going to end up being a win for us in the long way. He's going to get everybody back focused and on the right page going forward. All right. The other game that I ended up watching on TV Friday night because of some work things that I had to do was the Dover Appo game. One I would typically have gone to. My son Tyler plays in the band, so I would have been down there, but couldn't. Dover comes away with a 27-14 lead. This was a game that, was really never over until the end. At least you didn't get that way. You didn't get that feeling. Mm-hmm. John Parker had 3 touchdowns as the receiver. Daniel McConomy, it was his show. He had a huge kickoff return for a touchdown for one of his scores. And so it's just, but for the reality of it was, Marty, it was the same story for Appo High. They do not have a passing game. No. And, you sent a tweet out and basically said if they did, they'd probably be in the top 4. And I've talked to a couple coaches that think the same thing. And I'm not sure this is anybody's fault. I think it's more of a fallout of when you have a quarterback and Ryan Von Brandt, who was your starter for 4 years. And when he did get hurt and go down a couple times, it was the quarterbacks who came in were the quarterbacks who are now graduated also.
Right.
And so it's it's a situation where I'm not sure he's trying different things. I mean, he's snapping the ball right to him now in a lot of cases. They're doing some wildcat just to mix it up a little bit. And God love Daniel McConomy. How good is he that the whole world knows he's getting the football, and
That's right.
and how good is his offensive line, and they're still getting up yardage. But this is going to be something that, as you put it best, it's really keeping them in the middle of the pack in Class 3 instead of being in the upper part of the pack. And it'll be interesting to see how things go moving forward.
Yeah, I got one message from someone who said this was an unfair shot at Jacob Yard, who was the quarterback. It has nothing to do with Jacob Yard.
Nope.
He's not the one that's calling 2 pass plays a game. And I went back and watched some of their preseason stuff and some of their scrimmages. He's got a good arm. I mean, he knows what he's doing. So whatever, they've chosen to go this direction, and that's their prerogative. And when you have a back like Daniel McConomy, it sometimes makes that a little easier. But when you fall behind, as you did against a team like Dover, and they could just pin their ears back and go at him, they'll give up the 10, 11-yard gains, keep the clock running. So it'll be interesting to see if Appo is able to make any adjustments going forward. I thought Dover, I said this earlier in the season, I think their backfield of Cosme, Kilby, and Parker on the outside are the 3 fastest guys in the state.
Mm-hmm.
And they showed it. Parker caught 2 long touchdowns. He ran for a third. Cosme, 8 carries for 51 yards, including a 27-yard scoring run. Jaquan Kilby, 103 yards and 19 carries. As you said, McConomy did everything for Appo. Again, the kickoff return, finished with 36 carries for 130 yards for the Jaguars. I believe that puts him at just about 500 carries over the last 3 weeks. He's really carrying the load for this team. If they run 68 plays, he's running on 60. He's touching the ball on 65 of them. But he's doing an astonishing job. And I really do think Appo, with their defense, and again, they got gashed a little bit, but a part of the situation goes back to the passing game again, because they're not able to stretch the defenses at all. They have a lot of short possessions, and Dover takes over, and that defense starts to get worn down a little bit. We saw what Appo's defense was capable of against Middletown. I mean, they could almost completely shut Middletown down, except for a punt return. So Appo is still in good shape. They're definitely a playoff team, I believe, although they've got a tough game this week. I believe they play William Penn, which is probably an elimination game for William Penn. So, William Penn is really going to come out with their ears pinned back. Dover, Chip Knapp again has this team just sailing along after that first loss to Arundel. They are looking really strong. They're playing good defense. That offense is just there's not many offenses you can describe like this in Delaware. They're an explosive offense. They are capable of generating points from anywhere on the field at any time. And as long as these guys can stay healthy, they're going to be a serious threat. Now they've got some big games coming up too, but right now they're sitting pretty.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the Jacob Yard thing, and when we said this, I talked about it, and you agreed when we brought his name up before, talking about the Appoquinimink passing situation. He was thrust into this varsity Class 3 starting quarterback position. I don't believe he played him. I'd bet my house on it. I don't think he played a varsity snap until this year. And I was talking to Dave Collins, the offensive coordinator, athletic director from Hodson, and Hodson's struggling. They're 1-5, I think now, and he said the problem is week in and week out, no matter who you're playing in Class 3, they're tough. Whether they're even Caesar Rodney hasn't won a game yet. They got 140 kids on the sideline. They're always running fresh bodies in. You got Smyrna Middletown, whose kids only play on one side of the ball. And there is no room to train and to learn the position. Again, because Ryan Von Brandt has been under center for 4 years, and Appoquinimink has been, last year they made the playoffs. I think it was for the first time. The year before that, they were in the chase. And so it's not like Appoquinimink's been in a situation in the past couple of years where like Caesar Rodney now, without watching the games, I'm not sure, Dan Candelora might be playing as backup quarterback who's an underclassman to see if he's ready. And again, I don't know the quarterback situation there, but I'm just using that as an example. Caesar Rodney's season is over. And so they can look at, okay, we got to start getting ready for next year. Appoquinimink has not been in that situation in the last couple of years, which is a good thing because it means you're in the running for it. And so we know Jacob Yard has some talent. We've seen it. But when you're put in this situation, I remember, I watched his first game at St. Mark's. I was on the sideline, a game they weren't supposed to have, but because of the AI situation and Appo had a game that got canceled, they ended up playing. And here's this or this sophomore quarterback in his first varsity experience. He's playing against Luke Watson coming at him, who's going to be playing Division I football next year. And, it's hard. You can do all the things you want in scrimmages and practices. That is not the same as playing on a Friday night under the lights against potential Division I future players. I mean, and so, Jacob Yard's doing everything he can. And you know what? When we wonder why they're only throwing a few passes a game, it might be because Coach Brian Timpson does not want him to lose his confidence. He had a pick 6 against St. Mark's. He's had another interception. I forget who it was against. And so, he's probably trying to protect his quarterback's mental capacity as much as his physical capacity, because right now Jacob Yard is the quarterback of the future. And I think he's got a bright future. I think they've got some bright young wide receivers. Noah Hoff had his first varsity catch, only a sophomore. So, the passing game for Appoquinimink could be the future of this team, because Daniel McConomy is a senior.
Right.
And so that could be the future of the team. The problem they're having right now is that they have a shot to be a good playoff team right now. But yet they only have a ground game. And so it's going to be interesting to see as they finish up their season. As you said, they got William Penn, then they have Hodson, Cape Henlope, and Smyrna South. You look at their next 3 games. If you're in Vegas betting, you probably pick them to go 3-0.
Yep.
Other than Cape Henlope might be a toss-up, and it's at Cape Henlope where it's going to be a great crowd for the home Vikings. So not sure about that. And then they play Smyrna and Sally. So these next 3 games are big. We'll see what happens, and whether they do start throwing the ball more or what they do to try to create some more scoring, because they do have a solid defense. We've seen that.
Yes.
They kept Dover in check. They kept Middletown in check. They've kept those teams in check. So, all right. So let's move on now. Those are the 2 games. Sometimes we do 3 or 4 games, more extensive coverage, but those are the 2 that we really thought
there just weren't any good games this week.
No, a lot of blowouts. But we're going to do our quick comment section, and that's where we just real quickly go over what we thought. Smyrna 42, St. George's 6. I think Smyrna's that good.
Yep.
I thought St. George's was better than they've shown. Now, again, St. George's, and I'll applaud them for this as long as they continue to do it, their schedule consists playing everybody else in Class 3, which anybody who's been listening to this podcast for 3 years knows I'm all for that. You've got the perfect situation. Why isn't everybody just playing the people in their class? So hats off to John Wilson for doing that. Unfortunately, when you do that, as we just talked about, you're going to play tough teams day in and day out. And that's what has happened with St. George's. And so it was 22-0 at the end of the first quarter, 42-6 at the half. So, a running clock situation. And Smyrna looks good on both sides of the ball. And I think, I think Smyrna, I'll look at their schedule while you're commenting, but I'm not sure they have a lot of close games left on the schedule. They've already played Middletown. They have to play Dover. That's the one team that has an opportunity to beat them.
And talking about the Appo game was a perfect lead into this, because we've been saying for weeks that Smyrna was one-dimensional. They've been using Ymir Knight as a Wildcat quarterback. Brian Wright got off to a rough start to start the season. But what they did was when they played Caesar Rodney, they kind of let Brian Wright off the leash. He had a great game. Yes, it was against Caesar Rodney, but guess what? It didn't matter because it got him into the flow. He's ready to go now.
Right.
This week, 9 of 13, 152 yards through the air. He had a touchdown pass. He only played the first half because it was 42-0 at halftime. Or it was 42-6 at halftime. Excuse me. There was no scoring in the second half. Part of that was due to the running clock. But they needed him to be a distributor. And Andy Walter wrote a great article about this in the Beta Bay News, where they talked to Coach Judy and to Brian Wright. And they admitted, like, look, this was like a new kind of math to Brian Wright, learning this stuff, because their offense can be so intricate. It took him a while to get going. Well, look out, folks, because he got going. And now he's the guy distributing the ball to Ymir Knight and Markel Holman and some of their other young guys. Ymir Knight, again, just, the dude, as Coach Judy calls him. He has a running touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and a passing touchdown for Smyrna this week. So again, he's still doing everything. Friday's performance for Right, was the third straight game he's been really solid. He had, again, 188 yards against Caesar Rodney. He threw 5 touchdowns in that game, and he threw for 161 yards against Sussex Central, which is a very good defense. He is gaining confidence by the game, and that is only making them stronger and stronger. And I had said that they were struggling to find an identity over the last couple weeks, and this may be totally unrelated, but Markel Holman tweeted "no identity" as almost like a sarcastic remark in a single tweet. That's all he said, and I kind of got the feeling that if maybe not just us but other people, hey, we have one now.
Right.
They do. They can distribute the ball in a myriad of ways. And again, it goes to show that if you can open it up and get these guys some time and let them do their thing, you can get it going. And now Smyrna is on a roll. St. George's, boy, we just expected so much more from them this season. Again, you don't know necessarily the level of turnover that happens in these programs, because a lot of times the coaches will say, well, these are the key guys we lost. But what they don't tell you is the other 24 guys they lost that contributed last year.
Right.
So this is a rough season for them. They're all but virtually eliminated from the playoffs. I mean, they have a chance to get back into it, but they're going to have to really improve on the second half of the season. So a disappointing team right now. They play at Hodgson, which could be that's kind of a get well game for both of those teams. That maybe I think you and I had mentioned that's an elimination game. That is, whoever loses that game is done.
And Hodson's banged up. They were banged up this past week. Dave Collins was telling me, but they're hoping to be back and somewhat healthy. But
yeah, they were. I know they were incredibly disappointed by the performance against Sally's this week. So this is hopefully a game where both of these teams get a chance to show what they can do, and one of them is going to come out with still playoff hopes intact.
And so, as you said, or Smyrna goes to Mergenthal or Votech. I don't know a lot about them other than they're probably good. Otherwise, I'm not sure they'd be putting
Actually,
Smyrna
I think that's a Smyrna home game.
Is it?
Yeah,
no, you're right. They do. It is. They host them. Yeah, you're right. It is. So that'll be a big game there. And then, as you mentioned, St. George's Hodson with probably an elimination game from one of the other, like we talked about, and like Dave Collins pointed out to me, we can still win we can still win our district because they've only played they're 0.
Yeah, that's what I said to you. I mean, theoretically, Caesar Rodney can still win their district.
Exactly,
I mean, these guys just haven't played enough district games yet.
Yep, exactly. So, but we're realists on this show.
That's right.
Or at least we like to be. All right. Speaking of Hodson, Howard Hodson, Hodson scores first, and Howard takes it from there. 44-18. This was a game, I went on Benny Mitchell's show and was 0-2 after the first 2 games on Thursday. So certainly didn't live up to your 1-loss only record when you went on there. But this was another game I thought Hodson, and my reason was I thought Hodson had the horses, meaning they had 100, twice as many kids on their roster. I didn't know the injury situation as well when I made that pick, but it was pretty significant. And so just a game, I think Howard's that good. And, last year people remember everybody was complaining that Howard wasn't put in Class 3, and Howard barely made the playoffs, needed some help to get in, but they were young. And Dan Ritter said that all along. We're not the team we were last year, the years before when they won the state championship, and they weren't. This year, they might be back to that point.
I agree. Yeah, this was an 8-6 game at halftime. Howard in the lead, so it was one of those games that looked like, wow, maybe Hodgson will do something. Well, 36 second half points from Howard later, that was over. They did have 2 defensive touchdowns as well. I believe they had 2 pick sixes. Yeah, Amir Madre and Jamal Johnson both had pick 6 returns for Howard. RJ Matthews, who celebrated, he had a heck of a day. It was his birthday. Yeah. He threw for 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. He ran for another. And then, oh, by the way, after the game, announced that he had gotten his first offer from Delaware State, which, by the way, where his father played quarterback for 4 years. So a really cool day for RJ Matthews and his family. This Howard is just, boy, they are the beast of Division II right now. They are just rolling along. They've beaten Archmere already. They drummed Archmere. They now drummed Hodgson in a game, which gives them 6 points, by the way, 4 for the win and 2 for playing up. So they are sitting pretty. In this case, I started an Excel program yesterday, putting the playoff points together, and Howard would be your runaway number 1 seed in Division II in Class 2 at this point. So they've racked up so many bonus points. So it's going to be interesting to see the end of the rest of the season. I can't really see them having too much trouble the rest of the way. They are going to be a serious contender come playoff time.
Yeah, they're off this week and
Yeah.
they're going to Wilmington Friends. And so, talk about an ideal schedule. They've basically got 10, 12 days between games because they played Thursday night and now they don't play again until next Saturday.
And I
And
should point
no,
out,
they
when
had
I
a
said they
bye.
have
I
an
think they
easy
have a bye.
way, what I meant was the bye. They're going to be
Yeah.
able to get healthy. They're going to be able to work specifically on Friends, who, by the
Yep.
way, is a great team. Robbie Tattersall, again, a great game this weekend. But yeah, that's going to be a tough game for Howard. But with a week off in between, you can't ask for more if you're Coach Ritter.
Yeah, and a week and a half, basically,
Yeah,
because
you're right.
they played the Thursday, so then they got that full week bye and then another full week, and so it's a great opportunity for Ritter to get everybody rested and healthy here for the stretch run going into what might be their toughest game of the season, going into Wilmington Friends. So, all right, Cape Del Mar, another one. Cape ended up running away with this 42-14. That surprised me that it was that lopsided of a win, and sometimes I didn't watch this game. It may have been a closer than the score indicated, which often happens. But if you're just looking purely at the scoreboard, you're thinking Cape ran away with this. You would expect that with a Class 3 against a Class 2. But what we had is a middle level Class 3 and a high level Class 2, at least in my opinion. And I think you agree with me. So didn't expect the score to be that lopsided. And so Mike Fredericks seems to have his team back on a roll. They play at CR this week, but then they play Sussex Central. So they're going to have to be careful that the CR game's not a trap because, CR is playing to get one win this year. And every team they play has to be on the lookout. They got nothing to lose. And sometimes that's when you play your best.
And coming into this game, I mean, Del Mar's on a roll, and Cape was still somewhat of a question mark. They've had some peaks and valleys in this season. Marquis James, I know the guy you love,
7.
7, 18 carries, 231 yards, and 4 second half touchdowns. This was only a 14-7 lead for Cape at halftime. They exploded in the second half. Del Mar is, again, as you said, a Class 2 team. They are playing down, but Del Mar was a good team. They're a solid team. They're a big team. I think this was a great game for Cape to go out there and show what they can do against, yes, again, a lower division team, but a team that is very good. So I like the fact that Cape just opened this up in the second half and just wore down Del Mar. Marquis James was just phenomenal. The offense seems to be rolling right now. They have a game against Cape or CR, where let's face it, they're probably going to win that game fairly easily. And then you go into the next week, as you said, with Sussex Central. So, who knows? Maybe they go out and they experiment with some things against Caesar Rodney. And, we've mentioned them a few times. I just want to point out, we're not putting down Caesar Rodney. They are really, really struggling to even move the ball past half field or midfield at this point this season. So it's a young team. It's a team loaded with players. So we can only imagine they're going to get better as the years go by. But I just want people to know that we're not just raining down on the CR parade. They're really struggling this season.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they lost 25 seniors last year, and a lot of people don't realize that because they struggled last year. And they struggled because they, some people are arguing maybe they don't belong in Class 3 anymore, and I'm not sure that's the case. But when you got to play Dover and you got to play Smyrna, and your off games are against Cape, and when I say off, I'm using air quotes because they lost to Cape. I think it was that might have been their win. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Our point being, we're not bashing the CR program at all. I like Dan Candelora a lot. I like the school a lot from top to bottom, and they've struggled the past few years. This is a team that was state champions in 2008. They were on top of the football world. They just haven't been able to get back to that level. Dan Candelora got them into the playoffs a couple years ago, and COVID hit, and the class system changes, and just a lot of things. And they lost. They thought they were going to have Markel Holman coming from William Penn down there, and then he ended up transferring to Smyrna. His family moved again, and so just some bad luck in some cases for CR. But but anyway, we just want to make that clear that we're not ever on this program.
Remind me of an old Bo Schembechler quote. He had a rough season one year, and a reporter asked him, well, you've got 17 starters coming back next year, so you got to be happy about that. And his response was, you mean the 17 guys who stunk this year? He's like, I'm not sure that's necessarily a great thing. So you never know.
Turnover. Yeah, you never know with the turnover.
That's right.
And again, we've watched teams who have been young one year and they're still young the next year, and they're still young the year after that, because you just don't know. As Butch Simpson, I always like to quote him, says, we're dealing with 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids. You never know from week in and week out, let alone year to year. All right, I gave you two of my surprises. I was surprised Cape won as easily as they did. and I was surprised Howard won it all, let alone easily they did. Not against Howard, but I have to say I picked Totson, so I've got to admit when I'm wrong. Any big surprises for you, Marty?
My two big surprises were just, again, the St. Mark's uncharacteristic mistakes. I expected them to be so focused coming into this game. Remember, they went to overtime with Newark, and I just expected them to be fully focused coming into this game, and it just didn't look like it. And but again, I think as you and I pointed out, I think it bodes well for the rest of the season that now they get a chance to refocus. My other big surprise was I really thought Newark Lake Forest was going to be a close kind of toss-up game, and boy, Lake Forest just like a locomotive over Newark. That I did not see coming. There's a lot of talent on that Lake team. Newark has played extremely well this season. They've given some teams a run for their money. Again, if they have their kicker, they probably beat St. Mark's. And I just thought this was a toss-up game. And Lake Forest came out and said, no, thanks. We're we're going to come in here. We're going to roll over them. We're going to move on. So there were my two surprises: St. Mark's uncharacteristic mistakes, and Lake just really rolling over Newark.
Lake Forest made their third trip above the canal on a Saturday morning, and they've won all three. Maybe Coach Freddie Johnson.
Yeah.
Maybe Coach Freddie Johnson's going to try to get all his games scheduled, his away games scheduled up here.
Right.
We'll see. So, but congratulations to him for coming up and taking care of business up in Newark. Newark's a good team. So, all right, it's now time for our top performance section, where we talk about not an individual player necessarily, but a group of them, a team, etc. I'm going to start, Marty, with the Howard versus Hodson game and the defensive effort by Howard. As you mentioned, 2 pick sixes, Amir Madre, 16-yard pick six, Jamal Johnson, 65-yard pick six. There was also a safety in that game by Naeem Pryor. So the defense basically responsible, if you do the math, for 14 points, not counting extra points or conversions there.
Which they missed on both of those.
Yeah. But here's what stuck out to me. Those 3 names I just gave you, here's their class: freshman, sophomore, sophomore. Howard Wildcats, I think, are here to stay for a while in class 2. Will be interesting to see if maybe they petition to move up in class 3, because they're going to be doing realignments here after this season and moving some people up and down. So those are my top performances: the Howard defensive unit of Amir Madre, Jamal Johnson, and Naeem Pryor, the unit as a whole. But certainly those 3 for getting in the end zone.
And I have 2 of them this week. My first one is the Laurel defense. They've allowed 13 points all season. They're averaging giving up 2.5 points per game. They shut out Woodbridge 42-0 this week. Really, they only gave, you could say that the starting defense is really only given up 7, because Sussex Tech scored in the first half against them. The other 6 points they gave up came when they were up 50-0 in the fourth quarter against Polytech, which I'm guessing was not the starting defense at that point.
Right.
I would hope it wasn't the starting defense at that point. So the Laurel defense has just been phenomenal all season. And, I communicated with Benny Mitchell this week. We were talking about St. Elizabeth's is just running over people. Kasim Benson and Chris Character, they're doing a phenomenal job. Laurel is shutting people down. It's almost like a mirror image of what happened last season. You have the high-powered offense and the team with a great defense, and we'll see what happens, as those two appear to be headed again for a clash in the championship game this year. My other is, as a unit, the Smyrna passing game. Everybody involved, the offensive line, they're giving Brian Wright time now. The receivers are getting open. Ymir Knight, Marco Holman are coming out of the backfield. The young receivers are getting open, and it's helped a ton in Brian Wright's development. And this is now a team firing on all cylinders offensively. We talked about their defense last week. They may be, given the class, it's sort of pound for pound, they're the best defense in the state.
Right.
And based on who they're going up against in competition. So I think you've got both units working extremely well, and they're rolling along, and they seem to be rolling right towards the playoffs.
So Markel Holman, you have an identity now.
That's right. That's right.
All right. It's now time for our top performer segment, and that's sponsored by Mary Kate Johnston of Remax Associates. If you're looking to buy or sell your house, Mary Kate Johnston will help you do so as if it was her own. An award-winning realtor with 20 years experience, she helped my wife and I sell our home 16 years ago, the same home we're still in. She still gives us real estate advice once in a while when we're talking about refinancing mortgages, that kind of stuff. We recommended her to several of our friends who were very happy and re-recommended her to their friends. You might think you understand the real estate market. It's either up or it's down. But Mary Kate understands how to get you the best deal, whether you're the buyer or the seller, whether it's a first-time home, an upsize, a downsize, whether you're buying or selling for an aging parent or helping your child buy their first home. She'll make sure you get the best value possible on both ends, whether buying or selling. Her website is marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. And there you can read her 5-star reviews and read about what others have said as well. And if you call her or reach out to her and mention that you heard about her on this show, she will give you a free year of a home warranty system. And she did that for my wife and I, and we still have the home warranty system, and it is more than paid for itself. So again, it's Mary Kate Johnston of Remax, marykatej.remax.com. All right, top performers, Marty, I'll let you go first. You're muted, buddy.
Sorry about that. For my first performance, I'm going to go to a team that has struggled all season. I'm going to go with Caesar Rodney. Jonathan Benjamin, a 71-yard interception return for a touchdown. The reason I'm doing it is because it gave CR their first lead of the season. They were actually up 8-0 this week before, again, it kind of turned around and they got steamrolled. But it was something to celebrate for a little while. And I think, you want to see these kinds of moments for CR, and I think we want to recognize them because they are having such a tough season. So it gave the Riders their first lead of the season. Jonathan Benjamin, 71-yard interception return for a touchdown.
All right. I went through different things and sometimes I try, and I think you do the same, to try to avoid giving accolades when a team wins 60-0 like Red Lion did. And their quarterback, Budinger, had 6 touchdowns. And so
Yes.
hats off to him. But it was a 60-0 win. Not to take anything away from Red Lion. They went in, they won the game they were supposed to. I think that's their third win in a row. So I kind of looked at things, and Laurel, same thing, 42-0 over Woodbridge. But Laurel's Mike Gonzalez Perez, was 6 for 6 on extra points. And so I think that's worth a shout out because, we talk about this all the time in high school football. A lot of teams don't have an extra point kicker they can rely on. When you got somebody who can be 6 for 6, no matter what the score is, no matter who you're playing. And of course, you got to credit the long snapper and the holder as well. But so that's my first shout out is to Mike Gonzalez Perez. And I'll go ahead and give you my second one.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to Sussex Central's Andrew Long. 4 touchdowns and a 49-6 win over Milford. And again, it goes against it was a blowout strategy, but Sussex Central's offense has struggled in some games this year. And so for Andrew Long to come up with the 4 touchdowns, he also played excellent on defense in his quarterback position. So he's my second top performer of the week.
My other one is because we expected a really close game between St. Elizabeth and Indian River, Kasim Benson, and I watched this game. And it was interesting. It was a NFHS network game. I have no idea who the announcer was, but there was one, which I've never heard on an NFHS regular season broadcast before. And he was good. He kept us up to date, kept the numbers going and everything. So, but Benson, 5 touchdowns. And it just, this kid, this is funny. I tweeted about this week. He does not have a single college offer. And yeah, he's a smaller kid, but if you watch this kid play, it takes multiple tacklers to bring him down. He's fast as lightning. He can cut on a dime. And he seems to be a great teammate by all accounts. And so he's my second top performer. My third, and I'm not trying to one up you here, but Benny Mitchell had this kid as his pest of the game. And his name is Ibrahim Leva Fajako. And Sussex Central kicker, 7 for 7 on PATs and pinned the Milford Buccaneers back on all of his kickoffs. Wow. So again, to your point, we're seeing some pretty decent kicking from some of these teams this year. 6 for 6 on PATs, 7 for 7. We talked about the Newark kicker last week, the young lady who's done a phenomenal job for them. So plus you add in Collins, and there's some other kickers I know I'm forgetting, but kind of a banner year maybe for kickers in the state of Delaware. We're seeing some really good stuff.
Yeah, I think there's more people attempting extra points than ever before, maybe.
Yeah.
Because
and
of
what? We've always said this, and it seems to be happening more and more. They're soccer players.
Yeah.
That they're bringing over from the soccer field. And these kids can kick, boy or girl. We've seen the Middletown history of girl kickers from their soccer team. So yeah, good to see the kicking game in good shape in Delaware.
All righty. So that's it for our top performances. Top performers, I should say, again, brought to you by Mary Kate Johnston of Remax. You can look her up at marykatej.remax.com. Mention us, and if you end up using her as a realtor, she will give you a free 1 year home appliance warranty with the sale of your house or purchase of your house. All right, let's go to what's going to be the week 6 games next week. And my top game, Marty, is St. George's at Hodson. And people might be thinking, what are you, nuts? Those teams have 2 wins combined. St. George's at 1-4, Hodson at 1-5. But I think, and again, every team right now has a shot to still win the district in Class 3, District 1 and District 2, because they just haven't gotten into the meat of their schedule yet. But again, if we're being realistic here, I think the loser of this game is going to have a really tough chance to make the playoffs. Again, this year, it's the top 3 in each of District 1 and District 2 for Class 3. And then the 7th and the 8th team will come from the traditional indexing system that they use to seed the teams. So even if you are in 4th place in one of the districts, it does not guarantee you a spot. And when you look at St. George's schedule and you look at Hodson, I think Hodson has the easier of the 2 schedules left off the top of my head. And again, that's because St. George's plays what I should be the traditional play everybody in your class. Hodson will play down a class again in a couple weeks against Newark. And again, that's no gimme by any chance, but it's not a Class 3 team. And so I think this, it's a district rivalry game, 2 VOTEC districts. St. George's travels decently. It's a short trip from there to Hodson. Saturday morning game. Haven't looked at the weather. Could be a really nice atmosphere. And, it's going to be a competitive game. You got 2 teams with 1 win. And so it's going to be a competitive game, and it should be a fun game. The fact it's 2 miles from my house probably is another reason I'll be there.
And if people are out there saying, are you kidding me? No Sal's Middletown. That's a gimme. We all know Sal's plays Middletown this week. That's the game that we all know.
The no-brainer.
Exactly. I did the same thing.
We're trying to help you. We're trying to help our listeners.
Sort of using the same logic. I went with Appo at William Penn on Saturday for the same reasons. I think Appoquinimink needs to get back on track. This is possibly a good game to do that. For William Penn, this is a chance to stay in the playoff hunt, because I feel like if they lose this, they're really behind the 8 ball. So this is, again, not necessarily an elimination game like we believe St. George's and Hodgson is, but more of a game for Appo to get back on track, maybe to try some different things, and for William Penn to stay in the hunt.
All right, so those are some games to watch. Both of those are over the canal. If you want to go below the canal, Dover at Sussex Central would be a good one to go to. Marty and I think we both agree it's Middletown and Smyrna are your top 2 teams. Dover, if they beat Sussex Central, it's going to be hard for me not to bump them up into the top 3. Sussex Central might be out of the top 4 if they lose to Dover, depending on what Sally's does, and, the rest of the season there. All right, so we wanted to talk. We were thinking about talking about the Class 3 situation, and Marty pointed out to me that every team can still win, so there's no sense talking about that yet. But in Class 2, we've got what we'll term, and Marty came up with this, the Big 6. And they're St. Mark's, Howard, Wilmington Friends, Archmere, DMA, Caravel. They are 6 teams that we are pretty sure, if we had to bet, would be in the playoffs at this point. And they're all Class 2, as we mentioned, and how Class 2 is doing it is what they did last year. The top 4 teams in each district will make it. So you still run the chance of a 5th team in one of the districts not making it, but being better than a 3rd team in another district. But that's just the way it is. And we'll see if they change that after this 2-year period. With the realignment like Class 3 has done with what they do. But we're just going to kind of go through these in alphabetical order. The whole purpose of this and the bottom line of this is, I think when the season started, Marty, I think we were thinking it was going to be St. Mark's, Archmere, and Woodbridge. At least that's what I thought. All these other teams we're going to talk about were going to be right there. But I think if I had to have laid a bet and said you need to pick 2 teams or 3 teams that are going to be in the finals, those would have been my 3. Woodbridge is out of that discussion.
One of these is not like the other anymore.
Very good. St. Mark's and Archmere are still in the discussion. Woodbridge is not. And again, nothing against Woodbridge, it's reality. And so we decided we're just going to go through, we're not going to spend a ton of time, but just talk real quick about these teams. We're going to do it alphabetically. And so there's no rhyme or reason. We're going to start with Archmere. They're 3-2. I would have told you they'd be 5-0 at this time, probably, maybe 4-1, losing to St. Mark's, who they happen to win. Their remaining schedule is Tower Hill. Then they play up against CR. They have the AI forfeit. They play Brandywine, and then they have what many will consider a showdown against DMA to end the season. What that game ends up meaning who knows? It could be for the district title. It could be for a position,
Right.
within the playoffs.
Yep.
It's not going to be a winner gets in and loser goes home.
Right.
I bet my house on that right now. So I look at Archmere as having, they've really got what I think are two tough games because they play CR. And yeah, CR's doesn't have a win yet, but they're going to look at that as a chance to get a win. And they've got a bigger roster, chance to be healthier because of that type of thing. So, I think if you're Archmere, obviously every game's a tough game and you got to win it. But I would look at them as having 2 of their last 5 games. One's going to be the forfeit with AI, as being games that, they're going to really have to show up and play hard to beat CR and to beat DMA. Probably.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think CR is the trap game in there for them, because they're going to see a CR team that's going to be 6 or 7 by then.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a chance to get 6 points for Archmere. Right. CR is going to come in saying it's one of the top ranked, probably the second ranked team in Class 2 now after Howard. Archmere, if I had to bet, they're going to be 8-1, 9-1, or 8-1, counting the forfeit going into that DMA game, which, by the way, will be played at Archmere. So
wait till 8-2. They've got the 2 losses.
8-2. I'm sorry. So this will be a great time for Archmere to kind of get well. I think possibly over these next couple of weeks. Tower Hill is down this year, although they are coming off, I think, 2 straight wins. Archmere had to have this game against St. Mark's from a confidence standpoint, from a point standpoint, everything. And they got it, and they looked really good doing it. Forget how St. Mark's may have made some mistakes. Archmere earned this win by playing great defense and very efficient offense. Archmere looks to me like they're in great shape going in. And again, I expect them to be 7-2 going into that DMA game.
All right. So the number 2 team alphabetically is Caravel, 5-0. Their wins are against Glasgow, Sussex Tech, Red Lion, Concord, and Odessa. They've scored at least 35 points in all 5 games, 40 points in 3 of them, and 54 in another one. They've only given up now 20 points in 3 different games, 2 shutouts. So they're playing good on both sides of the ball. Glasgow's probably not making the playoffs. Sussex Tech will be on the fence. Red Lion should be in if they continue to play well. Concord probably not making the playoffs. Odessa probably making the playoffs. So you can go back and forth with the schedule there. But Caravel looks good. They've got Woodbridge coming up this week. They've got Lake Forest. They've got Delmar.
Yep.
That could be 0-3. Could also be 3-0.
Yeah.
Or somewhere in between. But their gimme games are over, at least for now. And then they close with Milford and St. Elizabeth. So the second half of Caravel's schedule is going to tell us a lot about this team, whether they're a dominant team that we should be considered a top 1 or 2 team in the class, or whether they're going to be a playoff team and then looking to make some noise once they're there.
Yeah. My one note that I wrote about Caravel is we know absolutely nothing about Caravel.
Right.
We don't. It's like, it's fun. And this is no disrespect for those teams, but it's almost like they played a 5-game JV schedule. Now they're going to some of the varsity games.
Right.
They beat the teams they were supposed to beat. And yes, some of them are going to be playoff teams, but they are not on the level of Caravel. I still have Caravel being undefeated when they go to St. Elizabeth. And I don't think that will be a close game either. I think they dominated St. Elizabeth last year. Delmar and Lake Forest, to me, are going to be the real toss-ups. Lake Forest, again, shocked me with their performance against Newark, especially offensively. That may be a trap game for them. It is the Caravel homecoming, which is a big thing because you're going to have a lot of fans in the stands. There's going to be a lot of support for them. So that may be the determining factor there. Delmar, they have to travel down and play them on a Friday night. I'm sure Delmar is going to be itching over the next couple of weeks to get better. They may come into that game, and it's highly motivating when you're playing an undefeated team. So, to your point, Caravel, this could go either way. They could end up with 2 or 3 losses by the time the season's over. They could end up 10-0. I think they're going to go 10-0, but I wouldn't bet on it. Not with some of these teams on here, especially as I said. I think that Lake Forest game is a real tough game for them, even though it is on their homecoming.
All right, so alphabetically, that brings up DMA as our next team. Started out 0-2. They've won. They won 3 in a row. Lost this past weekend to a very good Malvern Prep school team. Somebody said I read somewhere they were the number one team in Pennsylvania, and I'm not
Yes.
sure if
Yeah,
that's
that was
over. Is that every team in Pennsylvania, or is that in
DMA
their
tweeted
group?
that.
Yeah,
I did not check to see. My guess is no,
yeah,
because there's some huge 6A
right.
teams in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so still impressive, no matter
Yes.
what
Yep.
level they
Yep.
are, if they're the top team. But anyway, so they're 3-3. The other losses were to Howard on that forfeit, and then Archbishop Curley, another very good team
Yep.
from down in Maryland. Wins against Del Castle, probably not in the playoffs. Conrad, probably not in the playoffs. McCain would have thought they were in the playoffs. Not sure now. They'll be on the
Yep.
playoff fence.
So.
So DMA has coming up St. Mark's, Newark,
Yeah, they have 2
Concord,
weeks to
Archmere.
prepare, by the way, for
So
St.
yeah,
Mark. Sorry.
no, that's fine. Yeah, so they're so DMA's. I'm not convinced they belong in our top 3 conversation yet, but they're going to be in the playoffs. And like all these teams, I think on any given night, any of these teams can beat other teams. St. Mark's lost a game we didn't think. I never thought Howard would be undefeated at this point. Wilmington Friends is undefeated.
Yep.
Archmere's got 2 losses I wouldn't have expected. DMA I thought would have would have another win or 2 in state, and of course they played 2 games that were out of state. Caravel I expected to be 5-0, but I still think any of these teams, there's not going to be any gimmies when these 6 teams play each other in the playoffs.
And for DMA, just to point out, Malvern Prep, and I watched this game. Malvern Prep only had a 3-0 lead at halftime, and it was because DMA made some curious decisions at the end of the half, which really set them up for the field goal. I thought, and I tweeted this out, I thought DMA's defense played phenomenally well. They wore down because they were on the field a ton. The DMA offense just couldn't get anything going against Malvern Prep, and that was not unexpected, by the way. But I give a ton of respect to the DMA defense, who really held their own for a long portion of that game. That said, now they have 2 weeks to prepare for St. Mark's. St. Mark's most likely will get a win this coming week against Concord. They're going to come in there still fired up over that Archmere loss, I'm sure. And I know there's a little bit of a rivalry there between St. Mark's and DMA. So I expect that to be a fun game. It's going to be DMA's homecoming. And the one thing we know about Jeremy Jean is that he is a salesman when it comes to this stuff. That place is going to be packed.
It'll be a production.
It is going to be rocking. So St. Mark's will be going into a hostile environment, not literally, but one that will not be cheering for them. So and it'll be interesting to see, because I fully expect St. Mark's to fill up that opponent's side as well. So
I would hope so.
This should be a great game. And then you get a Newark team that, who knows? I mean, Newark is capable of playing with anyone, it appears. They're also capable of losing to anyone, just like we said. So then Concord is probably down, and then they finish the season with Archmere. This could go a lot of different ways. As you said, this could be for the district championship. This could be for seeding. For DMA, it could just be a game that they're hoping to win. But both of those teams are going to be in the playoffs. So yeah, DMA's got a rough road ahead. They got this hearing this Thursday, then they got, at least they got a week off again to prepare for St. Mark's. So it's going to be an interesting finish for the season for DMA. But again, I did want to shout out their defense. I thought was very good against Malvern Prep.
All right, that brings us to Howard, the letter H, undefeated. Their wins are against DMA with a forfeit for the ineligible player. They rolled Concord. They rolled Brandywine. Close game win against Archmere. Not as I thought it would be a bigger blowout against Mount Pleasant. Credit to Mount Pleasant for it not being a blowout. As we talked about, that that's one of those games coming off a huge win against Archmere, where you may just not be ready to play, no matter what Coach Dan Ritter does. And so they escaped, and that's what good teams do. They play poorly and they escape, and that's what happened there. And then they rolled Hodson. So when you look at Howard's schedule, Marty, they've got Friends after this long layoff, 14, 15 days with the bye, and then they got Tower Hill, AI, and Woodbridge. You would think, obviously AI is a forfeit, but Tower Hill and Woodbridge, you think would be wins. So Howard's, potential undefeated season will be that game against Wilmington Friends.
And by the way, I want to point this out. As I said, I started doing this math yesterday. Howard is in the playoffs. They cannot be knocked out. They're 3-0 in their conference, or in their district. They play 5 district games. There are 3 teams in their district that already have 2 losses. The best they can do is tie Howard. Howard has beaten all 3 of those teams. So Howard is in.
Right.
Again, Wilmington Friends is going to be a tough game. Every time I think of Robbie Tattersall and what he's done for that program, he's kind of like the Chris Albero of Wilmington Friends, where he does a little bit of everything. He does it on defense. He does it on offense. He can run it. He can throw it. That's going to be a tough game. But again, it's funny the way these schedules work out. They have 2 weeks to prepare for them.
Mhm.
Howard is probably playing better than any team in the state right now overall in terms of from the start of the season to right now. When that DMA game was halted, they were up 8-0, but they had, I would guess DMA was close to negative yards in that game. That Howard defense was ferocious. Wilmington Friends, I think, is a toss up. Tower Hill, they should win that game. Woodbridge, most likely they win that game. Again, Woodbridge really struggling this season. So they are in a position for an undefeated season, but boy, having Friends right in front of them is tough. And that's going to be a physical game. And Howard's got a ton of speed on the outside, but I know Friends is again playing very physical right now. So I'm looking forward to that one.
All right, St. Mark's, the 5th out of the 6, only in the alphabetical order that we've been talking about here. Marty, I'll talk about who they've beaten. You can talk about who they have left. And it's kind of been, when you look at it, it's kind of been up and down. Even though they were undefeated going into this last game, they squeaked out a win against Appoquinimink, moving up a class to play a game that they weren't expected to play. I think they had about 4 days notice, those two teams, that they were playing that as a result of AI's canceling its season. Then they clobbered Red Lion. They clobbered Woodbridge. And by clobbered, I mean 48-0, 49-0. Barely beat Newark. Needed overtime to beat Newark, which nobody expected after their start 3-0. A lot of people thought it'd be a running clock. Not the case. Hats off to Jody Russell and the Newark team. Then they clobbered Conrad. No real surprise there. And then they lost to Archmere. Yeah. So, it's been up and down. A big win, but a close one. 2 huge wins, a barely win in overtime, and then a big win, and then a loss. So they've got a tough schedule, one tough game. I'll let you talk about their schedule moving forward.
Yeah, they've got Concord next week, which should be a win. Concord is struggling this year, although they did beat Mount Pleasant, I believe, 7-0 yesterday. DMA, that's going to be a tough one. I'm telling you that I just sense this rivalry between these two. I just think that's going to be a phenomenal game. Then they finish with Delcastle. Boy, Delcastle is the hard luck team of this season because they have had leads, I believe, in almost every game. They are scoring a ton of points. They just can't get over that hump. And Coach Gary Galloway, he's doing a great job with that program. But right now, anyway, it's not paying off in the wins and losses, but they are a different team. So you never know there, too. I mean, remember, they played St. Mark's last year. They came out and boom, it was 14-0. Right. I texted you. You were in an event. And you're like, what? Is that a mistake? Right. So you never know. And then they finish with McCain. It's going to depend on how McCain is these next couple of weeks because McCain is kind of a toss up right now as far as whether they're going to go down and not make the playoffs or whether they're a team that's going to kind of regroup and get things together again. It's a great story again with the AI kids, but St. Mark's sitting pretty here, except with the one exception possibly of the DMA game, which should be phenomenal.
All right, the last one, I'm going to call my sleeper, Wilmington Friends. And when I say sleeper, I firmly expected them to do well. I firmly expected them to make the playoffs. I wouldn't have said they're going to be undefeated this season just because they're kind of under everybody's radar. And they probably like, Bob Tattersall, the all-time winningest coach. I think he coached about 76 years. Actually, that's probably his age. Retires. Robbie, his son, Rob, I'm going to make sure I get this right. Bob retired. Son Rob is now the head coach. He's sort of been in that role the last couple years, not officially, but he's certainly been helped run the program. People who remember Bob had some health problems, missed a year, but was still the head coach in title, as he should be. And then, of course, the quarterback is the grandson of Bob, son of Rob, and that's Robbie, who is already committed to go to Yale. So it's it's a great, Wilmington Friends is a great family story for football. Not just the Tattersall family, but overall. But they're 5-0. And you got to put them until they lose. You got to put them right up there with everybody else. And we'll know they've got to bye this week. And then we'll know the following week, Marty, just how good this Wilmington Friends is.
Yes. And I think 3 of their wins you could say are really impressive. They blew out Delmar, who became a much better team. They blew out Tatnall, who is just getting it together now with 2 straight wins. And they blew out Archmere, which, again, no one saw coming. Next week they have, Glasgow this week, which they beat 44-6. That was no surprise there. Next week they have Mount Zion Preparatory Academy. You and I don't know anything about them. It's the Wilmington Friends homecoming. I'm guessing they're not inviting a monster to their homecoming game, so I anticipate a win there. Then it gets tough, boy. You got Howard on October 21st. It's a 5 p.m. game at Abyssinia, a Friday night. That could go either way. And that could be a battle of 2 unbeatens again.
Yep.
Brandywine, they get past them. Mount Pleasant just hasn't been able to generate much offense. They get past them, and then they end with St. Andrews, who's really struggling. So, if you look at the schedule, taking into account that we don't know much about Mount Zion, Howard is the one blip on the screen here that
Mhm.
really looks like a game that could go either way. Obviously,
Mhm.
so Friends is they're on the cusp of a 9-1 or 10-0 season, and yeah, I think a lot of people are not talking about them. I put out the tweet of the Big Six the other night and just said, listed them as one of the title contenders. And I
Mhm.
truly believe all six of the teams we
Yep.
just talk about have a legitimate shot to wear the crown at the end of the season.
I do too. I think there's a lot of parity.
There
I
is.
don't think it's that case in Class 3 necessarily. I think there's going to be two and possibly a third team that we think has a legitimate shot to win a title.
Agreed.
Middletown, Smyrna, and Dover is the one I'm waiting to see when they play
Yep.
Smyrna. And then down at Class 1, you got Laurel and St. Elizabeth, and a lot of afterthoughts after that. Teams that are playing well. Odessa's playing well, Charter School, Wilmington's
Yep.
playing well, but I'm not sure they're at the Laurel and the St. Elizabeth level. We'll find out. That's why they play the games. But I agree with you completely. The six teams we just talked about, I'd have a tough time betting against in a title game, no
Right.
matter who they're playing, because it's going to be a toss up and it should be fun. And let's hope it is. Let's hope that the games to get to the title game are fun. And let's hope the title game is as competitive as we think it is. All right. Before we do our shout outs, want to again give a shout out to our sponsors here. Andre L Photography. That's Andre L Photography.com. If you're looking for a photographer to take action shots, still shots, team shots of your team, organization, or your child. He's a great guy, takes great photos, as he proved to me when he sent some of my son last week, and I really appreciate that. And the other one is if you're looking to buy or sell a house or even just to explore the possibility in today's market as it changes, Mary Kate Johnson of Remax Realty is a great person to have. It's marykatej.remax.com. And again, let her know you heard about her on the podcast. And if you end up using her as a realtor, you'll get a free 1-year appliance warranty, which my wife and I did 16 years ago and still do to this day. All right, shout outs, Marty. I'm going to go first. Shout out to sophomore Appoquinimink wide receiver Noah Hoff, catching his first reception of his varsity career. It's going to be a great career moving forward. We've talked about the Appo passing game, not a lot of chances to get catches this year. And so it was really special and neat to see him do that. He's a friend of the family, in full disclosure, but certainly worthy of that shout out for making it was a diving catch, a little short coming back at him, and he came back and caught it on the ground. As they were trying to dive there. And actually, it was the backup quarterback in at that point. So great for him to make a good catch to give that quarterback the confidence he needed. So my first shout out to Noah Hoff.
And I'll just real quickly add on to that. His mom, Amy Hoff, does the most of the social media stuff for Appoquinimink, including some phenomenal artwork. She produced the media guide that they sold a few weeks ago, which looked phenomenal. So a shout out to both of them, him on the field and mom off the field. For mine, I just wanted to point out a few guys from Lake Forest. Again, this game shocked me, the 53-24 win over Newark. Jameer Snell caught 2 long touchdown passes. He had a pick 6 as well. Their running back Young finished with 16 carries, 109 yards. Jonathan Tyndall, the quarterback, passed for 175 yards. He only completed 5 passes. You do the math. That's a pretty good day. So yeah, my shout out to the Lake Forest guys who really got the offense humming against Newark.
All right. Do you have any others, Marty, or was that it?
I did, and that was it for this week.
Okay. All right. So, and the reason I asked that, I want to, my last shout out is kind of on a sad note. If you know the name Brian Bassard, if you've been around Delaware High School football for a long time, he played at Dover High School. He coached at played at the University of Delaware, coached at the University of Delaware, is currently on the Delaware State University staff as the offensive coordinator. Just a sad situation. He's in a hospital up in Pennsylvania. They found that he had pancreatic cancer, stage 4. While they were trying to work on making him better in that, he had a couple of strokes, and he's apparently not doing well at all. And it's out on social media, so we're not reporting anything that, certainly all of his friends and his former teammates and players know all about it. But Delaware High School football is a small community, and he was a big part of it, both as a player and as a coach. So keep your thoughts and prayers for him, his family, and his friends as Brian struggles to here at the end what he's going through with everything.
Absolutely.
So sad way to end the show, but I thought we definitely wanted to make people aware of that who already weren't, and let the Bassards know we are thinking and praying about them. So that's going to do it for this week. And we appreciate you following us, liking us, subscribing to us on Twitter, on YouTube, Facebook, hashtag DELHS Football is where you can find us on Twitter, the DELHS Football Pod on Facebook. And you can just Google us on YouTube and it comes up. We appreciate but all the listeners to the show. And so with that, we will see you next week for another review, recap, previews, and everything that we've offered over the show over all these years. So for Marty Sheehan, I'm John Buzby. Have a great sports week.